Good morning, welcome to the Point. Auto no fault insurance. That was the big headline coming out of the Mackinac Policy Conference from the Detroit Regional Chamber's annual event on Mackinac Island. The governor signed the legislation here, and we talked to her about that and compromise. First time on the island for this conference as the governor, and you come in just a few days after a bipartisan agreement on auto no fault insurance that some cynics, like one you're looking at, thought was unlikely, and it came together in less than 6 months. What does that do to you coming in to this conference talking about wanting to work together in a bipartisan manner to get other things done?
Well, as you know, I ran on a platform about building bridges, literally and figuratively, politically and geographically. We have challenges in the state that when we meet them, and we remember we're Michiganders first, before we're West Siders or Detroiters, before we're Republicans and Democrats, when we meet our obligations as Michiganders, every one of us benefits. We have a historic agreement that we've done more in 5 months than anyone's been able to accomplish on that issue in 5 years. I think that this bodes well for where we are headed in the state and really fixing things like the roads to the education system and cleaning up drinking water. These are nonpartisan issues, and I think this is real momentum.
I assume that the conversation about roads continues and even will here on the island, but one of the other focuses is going to be about what goes on those roads and how we deal with that innovative technology that is coming next. I know you're talking about that later, talking about some charging stations from Consumers Energy. All of those things, as we speak, have not been fully unveiled. But in general, talk to me about the importance of us staying in the forefront of that technology if we are in fact to remain the motor capital of the universe.
Right. Well, you know, we are the future of mobility right here in Michigan. We are doing some innovative things in terms of research and development and manufacturing. No one can compete with us with regard to our engineering and our prowess on all those fronts. But we have to continue to maintain our edge. And that's why, you know, I know everything seems to get back to the roads with me, but the fact of the matter is, if you come into any airport in Michigan and you get on our roads, it undermines everything we're trying to do in mobility. We need to be connected. We need to be able to support electric vehicles. We need to support autonomy with regard to what's happening in the mobility space. And so Michigan is known for being innovators, for, you know, I think inventing the future on so many different fronts, and mobility is a place where we need to maintain our pole position. And that's why, as we make announcements and we see kind of where the industry is changing, we as a state have to have the fundamentals right to get ahead.
I want to take the overlay of auto no fault insurance and look at some of these other issues, because there were people, including yourself, drawing lines in the sand that would say, I'm not going to do this, and if you do this, I will veto this. All of that conversation happened in a pretty short period of time. 2 bills passed. You said, nope, not going to do either one of them. Some of the people who were involved on the other side of the process says, nope, we're not going to do some of that. Then you both said, yeah, we can do some of all of this. Is that now how you approach the roads? I know the two are not necessarily connected. I'm not trying to make that connection. But is that process the way you approach these roads?
Well, you know, I believe in being honest, and the honest assessment of what those original bills were was not good enough. It would hurt people in the state, and so I was very clear I would veto them if they had gotten to my desk. And it was because I was clear that the legislature took it seriously and we got to the table and started negotiating. It doesn't mean it was always easy. It doesn't mean that it's a perfect end product, but I do think it represents the best that we can do at this juncture, and I think that's a great thing. We've seen people just grind to a halt. We've seen divided government show complete dysfunction in Washington, D.C. We also established right here in Michigan on this first tough issue that we could get to the table, stay at the table, and produce something that we could have resounding support for on both sides of the aisle. That's what our voters and our people of the state expect and want from their government, and frankly, I think it's what they deserve. So I do think it bodes well. We've established an enormous amount of trust and goodwill in a term-limited arena. That's very hard to do, and we've made big strides already in the first part of this year, but we got to keep that momentum going and stay focused on issues where we can find common ground.
As I walked from the dock up to the Grand, I ran into a number of people that are stakeholders in auto no fault insurance, and from different arenas. And all of them were grousing a little bit about some portion of that bill. And it sounds a little cliche, and I've heard it said, but it is almost true. that if everybody's a little unhappy, it was probably a good compromise because not everybody got everything, right?
I think at the end of the day, if we all stayed focused on what we were trying to accomplish, and that was give drivers some relief and ensure that the safety net is still intact. Real compromise means no one ends up winning on every issue they wanted. And I think that's what we have here, and it's going to be a good thing for our state.
So when you go forward, first, I guess, next big thing will be budgets, I'm guessing. You have the advantage that 16 years of governors haven't had, and that's that you've been on that side of the budget. You've put them together, so you know what that process looks like. We're coming down to about 15 days left in session before they're scheduled for a summer break. Is this something that can hold over the summer, negotiations continue, or does the legislature need to get this done before they leave?
We need to get this done before anyone takes a vacation. And I think, what I'm encouraged by is that during our no-fault discussions, we talked about the budget, we talked about the roads, we talked about funding for the roads. And there is, I believe, a real sincere dedication to staying and continuing to work until we have that resolved. School districts' calendars start a lot earlier than the state of Michigan's does. We've got a culture of getting budgets done before vacations happen that was created over the last 8 years, and we need to continue that so that our districts can have some, relief in knowing what they're going to be working with as they start the school year, and that we can actually have some truth in taxation and accountability in our state budget. We owe it to the people of our state. That's what I ran on, and I believe we're going to get it done.
Well, one of the things that entails is you're asking for the extra money for roads, which is something that you talked about back in March 6th, I think, when you rolled out your budget. But then you talked about taking money out of silos and putting it back where it belongs. So the whole budget is intertwined. It's not like you can just pass a budget and say, now let's deal with transportation,
right,
because it would infect higher education, K through 12 education, community colleges, and transportation. So that's a lot to get done.
Well, we just showed that we are capable of doing incredibly hard things in a short period of time if we all are genuinely interested in getting it done. So I am confident that we can do that. But the first piece is coming to an agreement and passing a road funding solution, because all of the other pieces of the budget do depend on that. You can't say, I love this generational investment in education, these efforts and opportunities to build paths so we can close the skills gap or clean up drinking water in Michigan, but I don't particularly care for the gas tax. They're absolutely interrelated. And when we do the one thing right, it gives us the ability, one lever gives us the ability to solve all of these problems.
Let's talk a little bit about education before we get to clean water and some of the other pressing issues, because this policy conference, as designed by Patty Poppe, who's the CEO and president of Consumers Energy and also the chair of this conference, one of her big pushes when she was talking to me before this was about education. And she made a very interesting point. She goes, it's not about teachers, because she says the teachers in Michigan are doing a good job. It's not about students. Our students are capable of learning, but a systemic problem in not coming up with the kind of outcomes that she as a business leader and other business leaders would like to see. That's a tough conversation to have, because we've been talking about education for a very long time, but we still haven't seen the results that you as a governor or I as a parent would like to see. So how big of an issue is that here?
I think it's a huge issue. This is a good conference. We've got thought leaders coming from across the state to present, to engage in conversations with policymakers. But yet, sometimes it feels like Groundhog Day, right? We come up, we have the same conversation around infrastructure and skills and education, and we'll do it again next year. And I don't want to have this conversation again next year. Next year, I want to be able to say, we got a budget done that actually prioritized these things. Here's the report of the strides we've made, and here's where we're headed. And then, what new thing can we add to the conversation that we're having here? What cutting edge thing can we be talking about in terms of the future of mobility or manufacturing or problem solving that we Michiganders are uniquely positioned to do? So I think that, I'm glad that the business community is engaging on these issues, but the fact of the matter is, everything revolves around getting a budget done that makes these priorities.
Normally when we stand here on this porch, we would be facing the other direction with you standing in front of the streets, but the fog has permitted that this morning. So
right.
it prohibited
there
that.
There is a bridge there, I think.
There is.
It's hard to see.
Or we have another big ticket item. But here's the question I have for you. The waters that lie in those lakes and the water that is in our groundwater and our wells and all of that, that is out there has got to be a real concern to all of us, because we now know about PFAS. Even if we don't know exactly what it does, we know it can't be good. We know that we have pipelines running underneath the straits right over here, and while we don't know exactly what their condition is or what's going to happen or when, it's a concern. How much does that get talked about here, and how heavy a lift is that going to be? Because that, I assume, has got to be a federal and state partnership.
Like every issue that we're confronting as a state, there's no easy or quick solution, but I am absolutely committed to protecting the Great Lakes, to cleaning up drinking water in Michigan. It's reflected in my budget. It's also reflected in the fact the first thing I did was ask Dana Nessel for an opinion on the Straits of Mackinac and the Enbridge Line 5. I'm working with the Attorney General. I believe that we're going to have some resolution in the next couple of months where we'll know what path we are headed on. But my goal has always been, at the earliest moment, to be able to pull that line out of the water and protect the Great Lakes from a potentially catastrophic oil spill, and I remain committed to that.
Final question, and this is something that I asked Senator Shirkey after the snow days bill was passed, and I said, should this have taken that long? And he looked at me and he said, well, Rick, if you can judge when legislation comes together and know when it's going to pass, maybe we should switch positions. I said I'd keep my day job. Were you surprised? I know you're privy to all the conversations, for those of us who are not. Were you surprised that the auto no fault came together as quickly as it did, at least from the outside looking in?
No, I wasn't. And, we had all these side conversations happening, threats about ballot initiatives. We all decided we're going to ignore that kind of conversation, stay at the table, and really try to solve a problem here. And to everyone's credit, bipartisanship, won the day, and that's a good thing for the people of our state. So I believe that we are capable of doing great, big, tough things when we stay focused on what our mutual goals are. We see some simple things take a long time, some complex things sometimes will move fast because they become a priority. It's something that I think will serve us well, having gotten through this one issue and on to roads and getting a budget done.
So the governor got a big piece of bipartisan legislation early in her administration, but what does that mean going forward? We'll talk with two of her legislative partners next. To the Point. Welcome back to The Point. Representative Lee Chatfield is the Speaker of the House, and he said one of his top priorities was getting auto no-fault insurance reform done. After it was signed, he sat down to talk to us about what it means. Mr. Speaker, as this airs on Sunday morning, you've gone back to your hometown. This place is much quieter. A couple of thousand people will have left, but they will have left after watching what I have called a historic moment when you, a Republican Speaker, when Senator Shirkey, a Republican Senate Majority Leader, when Governor Gretchen Whitmer all stood together and watched as she signed legislation you had passed less than a week earlier that changes fundamentally auto no-fault insurance in the state of Michigan, something that's really never been done. How big is that?
Well, it's a big deal, Rick, and this car insurance reform has eluded our state for the past 30 years. And as I've had the opportunity, as other legislative leaders have, to travel the state and talk to different people, really from all walks of life, we've found out two things. Number one, people are fed up with paying the highest car insurance rates in the country. And number two, they want government to stop being a part of the problem and start being a part of the solution. This truly was a historic reform, and we actually proved, I think, to the entire country that even in an era of divided government, you can reach consensus. And I applaud Senate Majority Leader Shirkey, I applaud Governor Whitmer for being at the table and working out a compromise to give the drivers of this state a choice and to also mandate rate relief starting next year. This was a huge win. It's the number one issue that's facing our state and saddling our residents with high costs. So to tackle it early in the first 5 months sets an excellent foundation we can work from.
I went to talk to Senator Shirkey back in January, and he said this was a big priority and that he believed there was a 4 or 5 month window to get it done. I talked with the governor just before that, and she said this was a big priority, and you said this was a big priority. An optimist would have said that bodes well, but divided government very often does not get results. So I don't want to know secrets, obviously, you're not going to tell me that, but how did this gel when 10 days before you guys came up with a compromise, the governor was threatened to veto the bill you passed and the veto the Senate passed?
Well, first let me say this. Reform has escaped our state and the legislature taking action not just in eras of divided government, but also in eras of complete control. Whether Republicans were in control of the legislature and a Democrat governor, or it was a Democrat-led House. I mean, the fact is, this has been a problem for the past 30 years, and the people have been asking us to reform it and to fix it. And that's finally what we did. But in reality, in the last 30 years, the House has failed to get any car insurance reform out of our chamber. And I believe that once we showed that we had the votes, and once we proved that we can have real reform, it brought multiple stakeholders to the table. But it's no surprise, Rick, there's a lot of special interests in this state that really have set up their entire business model to auto no fault. And for them, there's going to have to be adjustments that are made. And there was always, a wedge in between getting this done, because the special interest groups were a roadblock to getting it done. But I will tell you this bill that we just got to the governor and was just signed by the governor today was not written for the special interest groups. This bill was written for the 7 million drivers in our state who are paying the highest car insurance in the nation. And we believe that they need a choice in their coverage. We believe that's the right thing, and we believe more competition is going to drive down costs. So this is a big day, I can tell you this, in my short stint in the legislature and certainly as Speaker of the House. This has been the biggest day of my career, standing with the governor, standing in a bipartisan way to deliver real rate relief to the drivers of our state, and it's really going to move our state forward.
How much grumbling have you heard from some of those stakeholders up here? Because the first person I met on the dock when I got off said, oh, this is, woe is me, because obviously a lot of the stakeholders came away unhappy. Some believe that's a good compromise when everybody's a little unhappy.
Yeah,
but
there were really no stakeholders out in the lobby that were just absolutely thrilled. And like I said, I understand they've built their business model around auto no fault and what we've had for the past 30 years. But I would tell you this, the drivers that I've bumped into, the people in my district I've bumped into here in Northern Michigan have been very thankful and have been appreciative. And a lot of the stakeholders were actually great to work with. They came to the table, they gave us ideas, they gave us solutions. But it is difficult to change things once they've been a certain way for 30 years. This is an incredible win for our state, and it's an incredible win for our institution, because in divided government, you're either going to share in the credit for getting things done, or you're going to share in the blame for nothing getting done. And I'd much rather share in the credit. And I love the state of Michigan far more than I want to see the opposing party fail. And I think that's the attitude we all need to have when we approach politics, because we vowed we were not going to be like Washington. We said we would not be plagued with the political dysfunction that they currently have. And I think today that we proved it. We stepped up. We stayed true to our word, and we followed through by doing what we said we would.
The world's shortest answer, because we're out of time. Does this mean that I will be talking to you about compromises on big grand deals, including roads, sometime this year?
Well, in divided government, you're always going to need to find a consensus, and there's always going to be a compromise. And if you can't get everything you want, get everything you can. And I intend on doing that, and I intend on working with this administration to do that.
So the spirit of bipartisanship that's broken out is contagious. We talked with the Senate Democratic leader, Senator Jim Ananich. Senator, we talked about this on the floor after this legislation was passed, but you've had almost a week to reflect, and as you and I speak, the bill it hasn't been signed, but it's going to be by the time this airs. What does this mean, both in terms of policy, but also in terms of opportunity for bipartisan cooperation moving forward?
Yeah, I think, but those are really important questions, right? So from the policy standpoint, I think we're going to see, I think we'll see long-term serious rate reductions. So people actually can see that their rates will go down. I think it's going to take some time, and I think people need to understand that we need to do a little bit of managing expectations, that it's not like your bill's going to go down tomorrow. But I think
it won't even be implemented until July of 2020
for the savings, 21 for some of the cost containment measures. So like you should see a reduction next year, but then it'll continue to see pressures on the bill to go down over the long term. We maintain the coverage model that we have in the state. We were the outlier, and not necessarily in a negative way, just the way it was. But we were the only one that had this unlimited coverage on our auto insurance. So I think policy-wise, we're going to see the continuation of good coverage and making sure that people, if they get hurt, that they still have the best care in the world. But at the same time, we're going to see reductions in people's rates, because we saw 20 to 25% of people in the state not even uninsured. In urban communities, it's even higher. So I think the system needed to be adjusted, and we did that. For the other piece about the cooperation working together, I think we built a lot of trust that we needed. We had 5 months. We were meeting every other week. I think it was important, but it was not on big policy issues. It was sort of getting to know each other, and I think Auto insurance is set the table for us to fix roads and the budget and our educational issues, because we've done a good job of painting this rosy picture the last 8 years, but there's a lot of problems in Michigan, and the governor she came in to solve them, and I think hopefully we can come together in a bipartisan way to do that.
When you look at the relationship between you and Senator Shirkey, and you obviously knew Senator Shirkey before, but you see how this relationship has grown in this quadrant group and with the governor. Is that something that has surprised you? I mean, I know you hoped for it, but it seems to, just watching each of them greet each other here on Mackinac Island, it seems to be a very cordial relationship.
It is, yeah. I think it sometimes takes a big issue to make that happen, and I think obviously auto insurance reform was a complicated issue that's been 40 years in the making, and this governor rolled her sleeves up and decided to fix it, and she worked with Republicans and Democrats to do it. So I think, to the question about surprising, I was hoping for it earlier. I mean, I was the only one that stayed in the job that I had from last term.
Right.
So I'm the old guy on the on the block. Surprise is probably a good term. I don't know exactly what the term should be, but it's definitely. I was hoping for it. I hadn't seen it, and now I do. So I mean, there's going to be plenty of times we don't agree.
Of course.
But if you have DC is dysfunctional, right? We try to make sure that Michigan is a place that gets things done. We've always been that way, whether it's the auto industry or whatever. We roll up our sleeves and we solve problems, and I'm hopeful that we continue with that.
When you think of the what's next, I go immediately to what you do about infrastructure and roads, because the budget is so intertwined that, at least as the governor laid it out, to get a budget priority that she wants, you're going to have that new revenue component, and she would like for everybody to stay in session until it happens. That's only 15 days, 15 days?
Yeah, I mean, we could do it, but also with an issue this complex, it probably may take a little bit more time. I mean, when it comes to the budget, we don't need to have everybody in Lansing. I mean, I'm going to have to be there, but I'm okay with that, right? That's the job I signed up for. Most jobs you work year-round, right? So I'm more than happy to sit and negotiate and bring people back when we have a finalized product. But I think when it comes to the roads, when it comes to raising people's taxes, people have a right to see what the plan's going to be. Right? We should make sure that we present it to people, give them a chance to give their opinions on it. And I think if you look at the roads, especially local roads, and go down into urban, communities at the west side of the state, Metro Detroit, the roads are in terrible shape, and I think people understand that it's going to cost more money to fix it. So hopefully we can do that.
So, and just quickly, to put a little finer point on it, when you talk about the quadrant, the four leaders and the governor will do that, the majority of that, the appropriations chairman.
Appropriations chairs and vice chairs, Senator Hertel, who's the lead on approps, maybe the transportation committee members. I don't think we need to be sitting there, in session just twiddling our thumbs. We need to be, we need to have a plan in front of us. We need to negotiate it. We need to come back and let all 148 members of the legislature give their opinions on it. But I think, there's a bit of an understanding that we have to sit there in session. I don't think we need to do that. I think we need to get serious about solving the problem. I think we could solve it in June if people decide they want to solve it in June. If it takes longer, that's fine as well.
So, as the Mackinac Policy Conference wrapped up, there was a good deal of consideration about what happens next. If there was bipartisan support for one big issue, could it be the same for others? We'll have a final note on that next. To the point. So, divided government can work. The legislature and the governor here in Michigan have proved that on a really big issue, but there are other bigger issues that lie ahead, like that 45-cent per gallon gas tax increase that the governor wants. Will she be able to find bipartisan compromise on that? That's one of the big stories we'll be following as the legislature continues their quest to put together a budget, and as the governor and legislature continue to try to find that compromise. We'll talk about that again. To the point.